Hello, I'm Monsignor Jim Lisante. Today, I'm personally speaking. I'll be joined by poet Tomos Roberts. Tomos's post-coronavirus poem, The Great Realization, recently went viral because of all the hope it provides. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Monsignor Jim Lisante, and Tomos Roberts joins me now. Tomos is a spoken word poet and filmmaker born in New Zealand and raised in the United Kingdom. During the pandemic, Tomos was inspired to write The Great Realization while homeschooling his 7-year-old brother and sister. Since its release, Tomos's heartfelt poem has been watched by tens of millions of people on YouTube. It has also been translated independently into 20 languages, including Arabic, Hebrew, German, Spanish, French, Italian, and Russian. It's a simple, rhyming tale read as a bedtime story. The poem, which is set in an unspecified future, looks back on pre-pandemic life and imagines a great realization. Sparked by the scourge, Tomos Roberts tells the story of life before the coronavirus, a life that falls apart when the virus hits, yet in the end initiates a better world, one where people are kinder and more mindful, and who spend more time outdoors and with their families than on screens or in an office. Tomos posts online under the moniker Probably Tomfoolery and has turned his virtual tale into a new book that parents can read to their children called The Great Realization. Joining me now to tell us what inspired his story about the good that can come out of the pandemic, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking the great poet Tomos Roberts. Tomos Roberts is our guest. I'm delighted to have him on. The Great Realization is our topic, which is being released apparently in the United Kingdom, the United States, and India this week. I hope every one of our listeners will go out and get a copy of the book. Many of you probably have heard this beautiful meditation, reflection, bedtime story, because at least 65 to 70 million people have gone online to listen to the words and the thoughts and the insights of Tomos Roberts. Thanks for being on our show, Tomos.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, of the million interviews I'm sure you're doing, have you been interviewed by any Catholic priests before?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. I like being the first. First thing is this positive spirit of yours, which comes across very much in The Great Realization. By the way, for our listeners in America, he spells it the funny way, with an S instead of a Z for realization, but it's the same thing either way. But I want to go back to the family of origin. The person you are, the positive spirit you have, the uplift that you offer to people comes from somewhere. What kind of family did you come from?
I come from a Welsh family, mainly of medical workers. My mum is a midwife, my dad is a doctor, and my big sister is a doctor.
Okay.
I was born in New Zealand, and then when I was 2, we moved to London, and I've been raised there.
Okay, now, why did they make the move?
For my dad's work.
Okay. Now, let me ask you, this is always hard for us to say about our own parents, but what did your parents do right in raising you?
Oh goodness, I haven't ever thought about this before. I think a good balance of freedom and constraint, I would say.
Okay.
I think it's possible to give your children too much freedom, and then they descend into chaos. And it's possible to be too constraining, and then they never have any experiences of the real world, and don't learn anything, which I think is a bad strategy, because you want your children to be competent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like they were fairly good at knowing when to let me go off and learn things for myself, and when also to intervene, potentially.
You have a great gift, obviously, for writing, Tomos. Does that come from either mom or dad? Are they talented in terms of the written word at all themselves?
Well, if they are, they've never shared it with me. They're very medical people. My mum is actually, she's a midwife, but she's also learned to be a yoga teacher. So
Wow.
she kind of merges the two. She teaches yoga now to pregnant women, and then often delivers their babies. So she's very interested in mindfulness, which she tells me about often. But I was always the one in the family that wanted to, do English and drama and politics and history and these things. And it was very much the case of, we don't know what it is you're doing, but go on and good luck.
Now, for those who haven't yet seen Tomos Roberts, The Great Realization, he's not the only star in the video. He has a little brother and sister in there. By the way, I just presumed when I first saw it that those were your kids. And then I find out that your brother and sister. Tell us about them. They are charming beyond belief in their few moments they have on screen.
Yeah, they're very energetic. Not in the video. I mean, in real life. Basically, when lockdown hit in the UK, I'd been living with two of my very good friends in a flat in London. I was working. I was able to pay rent and support myself. When lockdown hit, my job disappeared overnight, effectively, and I couldn't pay my rent anymore. So I had to move back into my father's house, where my 7-year-old brother and sister live. And, then my dad was called back into the hospitals because, the NHS called the frontline workers. So not only did I go in the space of 2 weeks from living with friends to living back in my family home, but suddenly I was the sole caregiver for two little children who needed homeschooling, and I couldn't believe what had happened to me. I was truly shocked, and suddenly I was a teacher, a chef, a human climbing frame. I was everything.
How patient were you?
Oh well, that is something that must be judged on a moment by moment basis, I think. I like to think in the best of times I was all right, but effectively, I was keen not to be irresponsible and just, leave them to their own devices. I was keen to, mentally stimulate them. And so I started trying to bring in my, the limited skills that I had, which were poetry and filmmaking, and using those things to fill our days by creating projects that I could include them in. And so that's why, they feature in that video, because, they're so full of questions, children at that age. And sometimes you don't have all the answers, but you can try and explain things to them in, in almost story-like ways.
Right. Tomos Roberts is our guest on Personally Speaking. We're talking about his book and his video, The Great Realization. There's another video you have that I'm sure people are starting to tag onto, where it's you twice, basically the positive versus the negative outlook on life. Who is Tomos Roberts? Is he given more to being completely positive, upbeat, seeing the glasses half full? Or is that other guy in the video, the other side, who says, no, everything's going to hell in a handbasket? Or is that you? Who are you most inclined to be?
Oh, well, I know who I'd most like to be. I think, in my opinion, well, all of us are both. Right. We're all both. Right. We all exist on this spectrum, which is constantly moving. On a second by second basis. And I think, from my observation, if you can spend more of your day on the optimistic side of the scale, you'll feel better, right? And you'll have a better day. And so that's the desirable place. However, it's, in my opinion, I think it's easier to, give way to the pessimistic way of thinking, to the hopelessness that surrounds us. I think it doesn't require much work to allow that mindset to pervade. And so I think it takes a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. I think the payoff is worth it. If you can actively try and see the good in people, and if you can actively try and see the good in situations, I think it's worth it, because you'll then begin to see a world that you want to live in. So
Okay.
I try as best I can to exist in a hopeful mindset. But just like everyone, I have my moments, I have my days, I have my periods of time where I think, oh, this is difficult, and that's part of it, isn't it? You never, unless you achieve
Right.
inner
Perfection.
peace.
Right. No,
Yeah.
very few people do. Thomas Roberts is our guest. Thomas, you are a enormously gifted man. You know that. This is a strange question to ask, but why, of all the people who could put together something that uplifts the spirit and gives people hope in a pandemic, why would God or the creator or whoever's in charge of things give Thomas Roberts this particular gift? What are you supposed to do with this gift? You have a great gift.
Well, I mean, so do you. You host a show where you get to talk to people, and people are able to listen to that. I think all of us just have what we're good at, and that is your contribution to the whole big thing. And ultimately, I think, for example, when the pandemic was raging in the UK, most of my family were in hospitals looking after people who were feeling incredibly, like it could go either way, and trying as best they could to keep those people alive. And I think that is an incredible contribution. And there's me sitting at home, quarantining, thinking, right, okay, I don't have those skills. I don't know how to do that. I can't do that. What can I do? Because I want to be useful. Because actually, I think the most meaning you can find on a day-by-day basis is by being useful, to other people. Because that feels, like it's, full of meaning and worth doing. And so, what I can do is I can tell stories. I can write poems. I can make videos, and so that was how I sought to contribute. I wouldn't say that my contribution was more or less meaningful than anyone else's. I'm so glad, I'm so grateful that many people watched my video, and I'm so glad that many people showed that they're interested in subscribing to a positive outlook. But that's all I can do,
Right. And you're doing it well, and that's important. Now, let's talk about false hope for a minute. One actress, a Broadway actress, I sent your meditation, the Great Realization. First, she was like so uplifted by it. But now that we've come out of lockdown in New York, she said, I'm getting depressed again because the promise of what he wrote hasn't been realized. And of course, it's not going to be immediately. You can write this beautiful piece, but it doesn't mean that there'll be a new world as soon as we end the pandemic. What do you do with people who have drawn hope from what you write, but they are disappointed with the fact that we've fallen back into some of the same not so great habits and inclinations because we're human?
Well, actually, I'm currently working on the next video that I'm going to be releasing, and the theme, effectively the setup is I'm back in the story. I'm back in the story time scenario, and it's my little sister saying to me very similar words to what that actress said to you. She's saying, why are you telling me these stories that patently aren't coming true? And she's feeling annoyed that I'm giving her false hope, and that the reason I've written this, and then I attempt to answer that in the course of the poem. I completely agree with you. I think it's, firstly, it depends on your perspective of time and of how long you're prepared to wait until you see results. Secondly, I think it's something that's always an option to people. I think just because on one day you can feel uplifted, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to sustain itself across time. I think it's a new challenge every day to find a reason to to believe that things can and will get better.
Right.
That's not something that once achieved once, like you've got it. That's something where doubt is always going to creep back in and say, yeah, but it doesn't feel like it's getting better.
Right.
And to that, I would hold my hands up and say, listen, I don't have answers. I think our job truly as citizens is to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's to look at the decisions that are being made around us by those who are leading us, and applaud them when we agree with them, and question them when we're concerned about them.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I suppose I'm not advocating a naivety where everyone walks around, in a dream world, right. saying things are great when they're clearly not.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side of that, I do believe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And by that, I mean, I think if you believe that the world outside your window is one that isn't going to get better, I think that the world that you see outside your window is going to support that theory. Mm-hmm. I think if enough people believe that they can, use a moment as disruptive as this, yes, to improve things in their own life and then in the lives of those around them, then, I actually think that the speed in which we would see change would be completely unprecedented. And so, that's my hope, and I'm just going to keep chipping away. And I see many other people doing the same. So, I think there's plenty of reasons to stay hopeful.
One of Tomos Roberts' themes throughout all of what you'll find online on tomfoolery is that we have an obligation, very, very, actually from my point of view as a Christian, very much in keeping with what I believe, that we have the resources to feed the world, to reach out to the hungry, the broken, the lonely. We just have to use those resources. Where does that come from in you, that belief that we've got enough to take care of each other? Now we just have to do it.
I think, I think this is something that is in most people, in all people, and actually, as we grow up, we become more hard, mm-hmm. and we become more hardened to these maybe more compassionate thoughts. I remember very, very vividly the first time I was with my little sister. She was, I think, 5 at the time, and we were walking. I'd taken her on a trip to see a little show in London, and this is a few years ago. And we were walking through Waterloo, and she saw a homeless guy on the street, and the question she asked me was, "Why can nobody see him?" And that was, that was heart-wrenching to hear, because, from her perspective, she saw this person in dire need, and, people swarming past in their busy lives, on their ways to wherever they're going, who, from her perspective, just couldn't see him, because if they could see him, there was no way that it was possible that they would not, intervene.
Do something, right?
Do something, yeah. Right. And so, it's very hard to explain to a 5-year-old. Well, I think they're worried that if they give him money, he'll use it for devious purposes, and that won't help him. So they think it's best to, it's very hard. But as we grow up, we begin those rationalizations, mm-hmm. in our minds. And I'm, again, like I've said before, I don't think it's my little responsibility to solve these deep problems, right. but I feel like it is my responsibility to hold my hands up and go, guys, I think we haven't figured everything out. I'm not looking around and seeing a place where I don't have to explain explain things like that to someone so pure. And also, I don't want that person so pure to grow up and then not see the problems as well. So
it's
that's
amazing,
what I'm working on.
Amazing that your 5-year-old sister has such insight, but it's a beautiful thing, as you say, because her heart is still pure. Our Pope Francis often says to us about the homeless, it's not enough to drop them the money. You've got to engage them, look them in the eye, get a name, and talk to them as people. And I think for all of us, the giving of even a little money is not that hard, but to care about them and engage them is not something we do. But isn't that great that your 5-year-old reminded us that we've got to do that? Good for her. She's going to be amazing.
I hope so.
Let's hope. Here's a question about New Zealand. Now, even though you're living in England, your roots are New Zealand. For many of us in America, I think we were stunned by the shooting of the people in the mosques there, but we were more stunned by the response of, it seems, all of the people of New Zealand reacted with a great deal of compassion, sympathy, support, empathy. The fact that you could, in New Zealand, immediately change your gun laws to prevent this kind of nonsense from happening again. What is it, and this is hard for you, you left when you were 2, but what is it in the New Zealand character that has such goodness, compassion, a willingness to change things that are wrong and make them right? Do you have any insight into what it is about your own people that is so darn good?
That's an excellent question. I think the government took decisive action and was in a position where it was able to make the changes. I think if the parallel you're drawing is with the gun laws in America, I don't know. I think my historical knowledge is patchy, but I think historically, the American Constitution has set up U.S. citizens to want to be able to protect themselves, from a tyrannical state should one emerge, which I think is what they did against the British 200 years ago.
Nothing personal, really.
I think to be completely honest, I think that question's beyond me. I will say that I think I will say I'm impressed. I'll say I'm impressed when something happens and steps are taken to ensure that horrible thing can't happen again. I wish that was the case more often.
Yeah, no, it's a hard question to ask you. It's just that in my own country, we have tragedy after tragedy and shooting after shooting, and we never change, and we never seem to redirect ourselves. And I was so happily wiped out by the folks of New Zealand who said, this can't happen again, and we're going to take steps to make sure it doesn't. It was the kind of hope that you reflect in your writing. And I just wondered if it was something that's innate to you and to your people.
Well, no, I think that's a humanistic thing. I think if enough people feel the way that you feel, I think that people drive policy. Ultimately, policy very, very often reflects the overwhelming will of the people. I think because I think when governments try and steer people in a direction they don't want to go, if they're not subtle enough, then there's incredible pushback, and so it doesn't work. I think if enough people begin to feel the way that you're expressing to me now, then I think things will change in your country. I just don't think enough people feel that way yet.
Yeah. For our listeners, Tomos Roberts has a book coming out called The Great Realization. Obviously, the video's online. I'd like our listeners to pick up the book and to share it with the people in your family because it's inspiring in so many ways. Let me go to something you knew as a Catholic priest. I'm going to be interviewed by this guy. He's going to ask the question. Tell me about your background and your family's background. Is there such a thing as a journey of faith in your family?
My mum is deeply religious. My father is isn't. I would say, but it's interesting. I was raised I was raised religiously. I went to a Church of England school, and my mum took me to church when I was growing up, and then I think it's there's so much to be, I feel like science tells us what's there,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that I think that religion serves, a really, really deep purpose in our lives and in our society. I think it is so important for telling us how to live, how we should interact with each other in the world, in this life, and how literally people choose to interpret these teachings. I think lies with them. I think that's an individual decision whether you want to interpret things very literally or very abstractly, and who's to say who's wrong,
Right.
But yeah, I've definitely been raised in a way that has been open-minded to religious teachings.
I want to thank Tomos Roberts for being with us. I want our listeners to pick up his book, The Great Realization. But more importantly, too, he's an ongoing gift and grace and talent. So probably Tom Fuller is a great place to go every few weeks and find a message that he does challenge and uplift and make us think and see things in a new perspective. You don't need someone blowing smoke up your dress, Tom, but you are a gift and a grace and a blessing. And I hope we have you around for years and years to come to make us see things in a new and perhaps in a brighter way. Thank you so much for using your gift to give us a spirit of hope and confidence in the future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
As we end today's program, I want to thank all of you for being with us. If you have any questions or comments about the show, you can send them to me through my website, which is www.closeencountertv.com. All one word, closeencountertv.com. To listen to our Personally Speaking podcast with some of our most recent shows, please go to YouTube and search under Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante and subscribe. Personally Speaking is also available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and Spotify. You can also listen to past episodes by going to www.ollmp.org, ollmp.org, and you get not only recent shows, but also Monsignor Jim's weekly homilies. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jadovitz, and thank you all so much for being with us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.